Despite being on top of the entertainment world thanks to an acclaimed series, it hasn't been the easiest ride to get there for Ty Burrell. But it turns out the stoner from college with the silly football dreams actually made something of himself. Well, after he changed his underwear, that is. Though he's now an award-winning actor with a hit TV series under his belt, Ty Burrell was once simply like many young adults and unsure of what he wanted to do with his life. Actually, there was one thing that he knew he wanted to do: smoke marijuana. A lot of it. Burrell spoke about his time as a student at the University of Oregon with Men's Journal in 2017, saying, "I drained the state of weed. It was like a thatch hut, constantly on fire, and I was living inside. I remember going out to buy weed in my underwear once, like it was too much work to pull on my pants." Aside from simply being a college kid with a desire to get high, that general sense of apathy may well have been sparked by Burrell being humbled in his early days of college. Burrell admitted that as a star athlete in his hometown school, he foolishly believed he had what it took to make the pros. But before he even went and tried out for Oregon's football team, he learned that a much more talented new pal had previously failed to make the cut. It was a stark wake-up call for Burrell, who went on to say, "I guess I'd figured maybe I was gonna play in the NFL, but it's ridiculous that that was actually something I thought." Perhaps Burrell should have had some inkling of his limited athletic ability thanks to his role in his school's record-breaking basketball team.
I was a member of a high school basketball team that broke the Oregon state record for consecutive losses.
Regardless, after his studies were over, Burrell packed up his weed and briefly worked as a firefighter before he would eventually find his true calling. According to Ty Burrell, it was his father, Gary, who was the main culprit in developing his skills and getting laughs, as the family patriarch often encouraged his two sons to show off their improv skills over dinner. Those times surely led to many happy family moments. But things took a turn in 1989 when Ty was only in his early 20s, and Gary unfortunately died from pancreatic cancer. Speaking to the Scotsman several decades later, Burrell claimed that losing his father was a life-changing moment in more ways than one. When asked whether the tragedy had given him the impetus to focus on a career in the entertainment world, Ty replied, "Yes, very much so. I wasn't a very mature young man, and I was pretty lost in my early 20s. A month after my dad passed away, I finally worked up the nerve to go into a theater class." In addition to inspiring his acting career, Burrell's father also provided the impetus for a project his sons worked on together. Alongside his younger brother Duncan, Burrell decided to write a sitcom loosely based on his early family experiences, including the moment that his dad purchased a middle-of-nowhere country store. Sadly, despite initial interest from ABC, the project was never picked up. In 2017, Ty Burrell penned a piece for the New York Times column, My First Time, where he recalled meeting with an agent as he was attempting to get his acting career going. By the end of the meeting, Burrell walked away with two bits of knowledge, namely that he was not attractive and that he needed new underwear. In the piece, Burrell recalled that the agent had some uninspiring words for him, writing that he was told, "Ty, I think your features are too big to get work in television or film. Has anyone ever told you that? You could maybe get work in theater, but you're going to need to shave your arms." After being left with the instructions to trim his arm hair before coming back to the agent's office, Burrell had a key realization: that he had pooped his pants.
I remember thinking really clearly, so this is the bottom.
After cleaning himself up in a McDonald's bathroom, Burrell left both the agent's criticism and his soiled underwear behind him. Before he became a household name, Ty Burrell had to endure the soul-crushing grind that nearly every actor has to go through, spending years toiling on the audition circuit and living in near poverty trying to make ends meet. But at least he wasn't alone. Speaking with The Telegraph about his early days with his wife Holly, Burrell explained, "She came to live with me against her parents' wishes in a roach-infested old army bunker in Mississippi when I was doing a terrible production of A Midsummer's Night Dream. I always knew she loved me for who I was because it clearly wasn't for anything else." Even after they moved into a slightly better situation, job insecurity was still very much a concern for Burrell. He was able to pop up in various projects, but mostly portraying less than desirable characters, like a serial killer in a 2003 episode of Law & Order, a bad boss in the film In Good Company, and a snarky nihilist in the Dawn of the Dead remake. It was a pattern that wasn't lost on Burrell, who told The Guardian in 2014, "Before Modern Family, I was always cast as the guy who got his comeuppance, and was usually killed or fired."
You have my permission. I ever turn into one of those things? Do me a favor, blow my head off.
Oh, yeah, you can count on that.
However, Burrell seems to be a realist about his particular category of typecasting and admitted in an interview with Time that he simply doesn't have the range to play something like a gung-ho hero, saying, "I don't have the constitution to deliver lines in the way a leading man in an action film can do it, with no irony. I'm not a guy who can stand unblinking and say some perfect thing. I'm too blinky, too flawed." Nowadays, Ty Burrell is almost universally associated with portraying Modern Family dad Phil Dunphy, inhabiting the character so completely that it's hard to imagine anyone else stepping into the role. But unfortunately, entertainment executives aren't exactly renowned for their imagination. The bosses at ABC were initially dead against casting the Oregon native in the role he'd soon make iconic, with their reluctance apparently being attributed to Burrell's underwhelming performance in the failed pilot, Foreplay. In Mark Freeman's book, Modern Family, The Untold Oral History of one of television's groundbreaking sitcoms, casting director Jeff Greenberg revealed that he was specifically told by the powers that be to look elsewhere for the role, saying, "Which was devastating to us because he was our guy, but we were stuck." Although Greenberg and his team continued to fight for Burrell, the man himself very nearly threw in the towel. As he recalled in the book, "My agent and wife both advised me that I was being disrespected by ABC. They said, 'Forget it, let it go. You don't need to be doing this.' My wife, being an amazing person, was trying to protect me from going in and having my feelings crushed for a fifth time." Thankfully, the network eventually came around to what the rest of the world would soon see, and Burrell was cast in the career-making role.
I'm actually a clumsy person. Like, I am a clumsy person.
While appearing on Late Night with Conan O'Brien in 2017, Burrell recalled the moment when life nearly imitated art, resulting in Burrell nearly baking himself alive when he got trapped inside his own electric car. And to make matters worse, his predicament was witnessed by a passing tour group, and after recognizing Burrell, a few members asked him if they could take a picture with him. Burrell declined because, he was literally trapped inside his car. A strange but reasonable excuse to decline a photo. The problem, however, was that the fans weren't exactly aware of his situation.
So I think to them, I looked like the biggest Hollywood hole.
Seeing as how he's now out and walking around, it's safe to assume he eventually escaped his vehicle. And it's also likely that a few tourists went home grumbling about certain Hollywood actors being too much of a big shot to roll down his window. Ty Burrell may have been able to pull from some painful real-world experience when his character's father, Frank, passed away in the final season of the show. Discussing the emotional storyline in 2020, Burrell told Us Weekly that he found it tough bidding his on-screen dad, Fred Willard, a farewell, saying, "He is one of my favorite actors of all time, and I would say he's influenced me as an actor more than anybody." The line between life and art got even further blurred 4 months later, when Willard suffered a fatal cardiac arrest at the age of 86. In a lengthy tribute given to Entertainment Weekly, Burrell once again expressed how much the comedy veteran meant to him, saying, "I loved when I knew I was going to work with Fred because a day with Fred meant somebody who was always prepared, somebody who was always going to bring extra stuff to the table, somebody who never added drama off screen. I love him and I miss him." What takes precedence over helping out a member of your close-knit on-screen family? How about your real-life family? That was the case when an emergency with Ty Burrell's boring old normal family prevented him from officiating the wedding of his on-screen daughter, Sarah Hyland. After Burrell had to pass on presiding over Hyland's 2022 nuptials to Wells Adams, the bride-to-be pivoted at the last minute to her backup option, her on-screen uncle, Jesse Tyler Ferguson. In an interview with ET, Ferguson revealed that he got the call a mere 12 days before the wedding that he'd be running the show. However, he wasn't completely left out to dry, as Burrell helped him plan the ceremony, with Ferguson revealing, "I did call Ty, like, what are some of your bullet points that you were going to talk about, because I need to fast-track this." He hadn't written anything up, but he had some ideas, and I was like, oh, this is all really good. This is a jumping-off place. How often does one get the opportunity to officiate the wedding of their on-screen daughter? For the average person, it's probably only 6 or 7 times? So while it might not be the most tragic thing ever, it still must have been a huge disappointment for Burrell to have to miss the big event. After 11 seasons and a whopping 250 episodes, Ty Burrell had a hard time moving on when Modern Family came to an end. After the finale wrapped in 2020, Burrell let the feelings out in an interview with Entertainment Weekly, saying, "You can't really process it until you're there. I had a sense for how it was going to be, but in the end, it was like a beautiful torture. It was like being at a wedding and a funeral at the same time. And then when we finally got to the last day, it was more of the funeral part. Burrell went on to say that although the cast and crew enjoyed shooting the last episode, the gravity of such a big part of their lives coming to an end hit everybody hard, adding, "It did feel like grieving for not being with these people every day, like we have been." Coming off the highest of highs with the cultural touchstone that was Modern Family, Ty Burrell's career has slowed down quite a bit. Several years after the semi-autobiographical sitcom he wrote with his brother Duncan appeared to get stuck in development hell, Ty Burrell experienced another small-screen setback. Burrell was due to return to the network that repeatedly rejected him with the ABC comedy Forgive and Forget. Burrell was set to executive produce and star in the new sitcom as Hank, a quote, perennial life of the party, who, following a surprise diagnosis, tries to reconnect with his grown-up son before it's too late. Unfortunately for Burrell, the pilot was unable to recapture the magic of his previous show, and the network bosses passed on greenlighting the series.